10th International Lead Poisoning Prevention Week. As it won't be any news to you as a participant joining this afternoon, I'm sure, to know that lead exposure is a very significant cause of preventable human poisoning. And the latest figures from WHO are that of the 2 million deaths from chemicals, half of these can be attributed to the effects of lead. So almost 1 million deaths from lead exposure in 2019. We'll be talking a lot about lead paint this afternoon, but we know that there are also many sources of lead exposure. And lead paint in particular, whilst it's been outlawed in many countries, it still is a significant source of exposure in more than half countries globally. This is something that we're tracking as part of the Global Alliance to Eliminate Lead Paint. And we're happy to report that more and more countries are taking action on lead paint. 89 countries at the moment have laws in place, but that's still a significant number of countries which needing to take action. So the International Lead Poisoning Prevention Week, which is held every year in October in the 3rd week, and has the aim of raising awareness about the health effects of lead exposure, highlighting the efforts of countries and partners to prevent lead exposure, particularly in children who are the most vulnerable to some of the neurological and behavioral effects, and urging further action to eliminate lead paint through regulatory action. As the title of this discussion group this afternoon gives us a clue, the 10th week of the 10th year of the International Lead Poisoning Prevention Week is coming up in October. So we're in the midst now of finalizing arrangements for that week. The next slide, please. So we're in the process of finalizing a campaign website, which will be hosted by WHO. And this will provide a source of materials, customizable campaign materials, a facility for registering your event, some technical background documents, and links to other sources of information, as well as collecting a list of registered events, so that when you go to the website to register your event, you will then be part of community that's being organized during the week to celebrate the week of action. So next slide, please. So as I said, that this year, 2022, is the 10th anniversary of the International Lead Poisoning Week. And the campaign has been successfully held every year and has provided a focus for organizers from over 40 countries. Starting off in over 40 countries in 2013, this community now has grown to more than 60 countries in 2021. And by registering your event on the website, this gives collectively the whole list of events organized throughout the different countries of the world. And you can go to this list to see your event and how it contributes to the overall campaign. So in 2021, we had 50 events in 58 countries, organized by non-governmental organizations, by governments, and by intergovernmental organizations. So over the years, we believe that this year has successfully and made a strong contribution to raising awareness on lead, specifically on lead paint. And we hope that this will continue with this year's campaign. And every year we try to draw attention to new materials being made available, whether this be new scientific information, new information from partner organizations, information on lead paint laws, on compliance, whatever the issue. We will make sure that these new documents are added to the campaign website so you can find the links more easily, as well as we'll be making available some new videos and infographics that you can use in your own local campaigns. Another special feature of the campaign website is that you can find some editable posters and flyers in different UN languages, and also ones which you can customize and put in your own local languages. We're hoping very much that the website will be launched at the end of July. The event registration page is already available, and I think that we'll be adding that link to the chat box this afternoon. So if you know of an event you're already planning and you want to share that information with the global community, you can go ahead and use that registration link. But we'll be certainly sharing the website launch and the fact that it's launched with all of the participants in today's discussion group. And we hope that you'll find the information there very, very useful for your campaign. So that's all I want to say by way of introduction, and we look forward to hearing about the campaigns which have been organized in the past and some of the tips that this global community has for arranging a successful event and participating in the campaign. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Leslie, for that important information and very succinctly presenting it to us. I hope participants will take the opportunity to answer and address some of the questions that Leslie has raised. And if you have any further questions or need for information, you're welcome to put it in the chat. If you have just joined us, please do continue to introduce yourself with your name, organization, and country. Remember to keep yourself muted and your video off unless you're presenting. And also to include your question, your country, when you ask a question or make a comment. I'm now going to hand over, we can have the next slide, please. I'm going to hand over to Olga to take us through to the first question. Olga, you are welcome to turn on your video and your mic, and I hand over to you. Thank you.
Good afternoon, I'm Olga Yurimka, public health specialist, and I am going to talk about the action taken in Republic of Moldova as well as the result obtained. More than 10 years ago, leading pain was a big problem that no one was aware of. In this context, it was a challenge to start taking actions associated to talk about the health risk of exposure to lead paints. Taking the WHO recommendation, the Republic of Moldova has been organizing International Week for the Prevention of Lead Poisoning since 2013, with the idea of removing lead from paint. Thus, it was necessary to carry out information and public awareness campaign. Due to several articles were written and in the press about the impact of lead on health. Next slide, please. It was extremely important to raise awareness and inform as many people as possible about the risk use of lead paint. That's why national agency organized events at the national level with the educational institution, local authorities, other stakeholders to achieve phasing out from the production and sale of lead paint, and as a result to eliminate the risk that arise from the use of this. Several roundtable discussions were also organized with the involvement of authorities responsible for the regulation of chemicals and state institutions such as the medical and educational institution to make the information as public as possible. Next slide, please. Later in 2016, the public association EcoContact is an environmental NGO, was also involved in elucidating the problem. It managed to test 28 paint samples, of which 16 lead concentration were detected exceeding the limit of 19 ppm. So this has brought back the issue of lead in public. In this context, next slide, please. We organized a poster and drawing competition on the issue of lead in paints in educational institution, and subsequently the best work were awarded at national level with the support of WHO. And the next slide, you can see the most successful work that was awarded. Next slide, please. One of the important role was the involvement of press. So the specialists from the agency participate in several TV shows where the problem of exposure to lead in paint was addressed. In 2019, a flash mob was organized at national level at the opening of the International Week for the Prevention of Lead Poisoning, and subsequently we organized a series of events through the country that addressed the health risk resulting from exposure to lead compounds. At the same time, next slide, please. Discussions were held with the country decision makers on the need to regulate the lead paint in the lead paint. Following the media coverage, next slide, please, was established a working group for the elaboration of the sanitary regulation on the limitation of lead in paint and similar coating materials. WUS in 2021, the working group drafted the regulation based on the law model law recommended by the LiP Paint Alliance, and it was put into public discussion with the representatives of all interested authorities in a workshop attended by international representatives. And as a result, several recommendations and proposals for the regulation were made and taken into account when drafting its final version. WUS, the finalized regulation together with a whole package of documents was submitted to the Ministry of Health for promoting. And our achievement for that moment are public is more informed about the risk of lead in paint, industry is involved, and draft legislation is developed. The next steps is the approval of a central regulation at a governmental level and the application in practice of its provision, and as a result of the complete elimination of lead of paint. We also plan to organize the International Lead Point Prevention Week for action this year to continue familiarizing and awareness of the population about risk for health of lead in paint. That's all I wanted to say. Thank you for your attention. And now is the question for those who have organized events in previous International Lead Poisoning Prevention Week campaign. What kind of activities were held and how did WUS contribute toward the goal of eliminating the lead paint? If you have not organized events so far, what have been the barriers to participating? Thank you.
Thank you, Olga, for that very important example from Moldova, which I'm sure our participants have learned a lot from. And thank you for taking us through to question 1. So we invite all of you to move into the chat and to please address the question. So there's a question for you about previous campaigns. And if you haven't organized campaigns before, what the barriers to participating would be. And there will be 2 poll questions. So if you have not gone to Mentimeter, the link will be in the chat and you'll be able to find your way there. So we'll see you all in the chat room to discuss question 1. So Leslie, there's a question for you. I'm not sure if you're seeing it in the chat. You are more than welcome to respond to it by turning on your mic. So the question is coming from Dr. Leslie Adogame from Nigeria, who's asking if any impact assessment of the effectiveness of the ILLPWA can be shared from particularly a regional or a sectoral basis. Leslie, would you like to address that?
Yes, thank you. I was just, I wasn't sure whether we had to provide written responses, so I was just in the middle of writing a response to this. So I'm happy that we can not.
Yes, we definitely want
Okay.
presenters must talk because it's too time consuming to write.
Thank you.
So please
thank
go
you
ahead.
for that. Thank you for the question, and I'm very glad that for the question from the participant from Nigeria, Dr. Leslie, who has pointed out that their organization has participated in the International Week on a number of occasions. So we very much appreciate that. Each year following the campaign, we do a formal assessment about the conduct of the campaign, who had participated, and what some of the activities were. And these reports are published on the WHO website. It's interesting to see how the participation in the week continues to grow, which is very reassuring, since the campaign has been in existence now for a number of years. In fact, each year we get tend to get an increasing number of participants, and it's not always the case that all of the participants from previous years participate again. So we are reaching new audiences and new countries, which is good to know. In the recent years, we found that the social media component of the international campaign has been growing, whether that's because just people's use of social media has been evolving, or whether it's because during the COVID pandemic there was seeming to be a shift towards more virtual events. But certainly social media is becoming more and more important, and we're just about to publish a report of last year's campaign. It will be, it's in the final stages of publication at the moment. So again, it will be available in the next couple of weeks, by the end of July or early August. And that shows, again, how wide the reach of the campaign has been, and how social media sort of can facilitate the outreach of the messages that event organizers are wanting to bring to people's attentions. So I believe that the most of the impacts would be at the local level, particularly if events are organized around a specific needs, like I think we heard from the colleague from Moldova, particularly about awareness of the at the national level. And if certain events have been drawing attention to evolving laws, or getting comments on laws that have been put in place, drawing attention to lab results from market surveys and so on. So we haven't been able to assess the particular local impacts, other than the fact that more and more countries are putting laws in place. There is an increasing interest in the issue, and so on. But we do have data about the reach of the campaign. And I think last year we managed to reach 6 million people through social media. So that's quite an achievement. And as far as WHO campaigns go, where we also have some comparative information, certainly the campaign on lead is very comparable to other international health campaigns, which is also very good to know, because we know that the messages that we're putting out on lead are reaching policymakers as well as activists in the non-governmental sector. So we'll be glad to share with you the report from last year's campaign, which also has a little bit of a history of how the campaign impact has grown over the years, but also perhaps some more interesting information in there about the use of social media and what hashtags have been used the most and so on. I hope that you'd find that interesting.
Thank you, Leslie. That was useful. I can see there are many questions being asked in the chat, and the team are responding to them. We do ask in the meantime, while you continue addressing question 1, that you also look at the poll that's on your screen. So in the past years, what type of activities have been organized for the International Lead Poisoning Prevention Week in your country or your organization? If you'd like to respond to the poll, you can go into the chat. There is a link that Eunice has posted, and you just click on it. If you're already in Mentimeter, you can move on to next question, or you can also go to menti.com and use the code that you can see on the screen. And we do appreciate you taking the time to respond. Thank you. Thank you to the 28 of you who've responded. We have about 113 attendees today, so it would be nice to see more responses. If you can, please go to menti.com or click on the link that's in the chat. At the moment, you can see the types of activities for the people who've been responding. Roundtable discussions seem to be quite popular, as well as social media activity and advocacy to policymakers. This is, I think, quite important to look at the different spectrum of methods for circulating the information to different target audiences. So just before we move on to our next poll question, sorry, Eunice, if you just go back, you can see that the roundtable discussion was the most common, with social media activity and then advocacy to policymakers. We can now move on to poll 2. I think also the point of media engagement is very important. We will shortly, in about 4 minutes time, be moving on to question 2 and our next speaker. So before we do, we invite you please to respond to the next poll question. So looking at your experience, which tools are most useful, do you think, in supporting a prevention campaign, either in your company or your community or your country or your region? Again, you can click on the link that is in the chat and go to menti.com, or if you're already in there, just click on the next question. Thank you. Please do continue to put your name and your country in. We do see some of you are listed as Eunice, and that's actually not you. If you can change your name, would be most appreciated. So you can move the icon over your name and then go to more and rename yourselves. Many of you are listed as Eunice who actually are not Eunice. Thank you. Thank you to the 43 of you who've responded to this poll. We do currently have 115 participants. So you can see, looking at the poll, what some of the popular tools have been. And I think it's really important to keep this in mind. So social media toolkits, as well as awareness raising guidance, also videos, infographics are very important. Many are being produced. Banning lead paint graphics, flyers and posters, as well as using the ILPPW website. So thank you to the 46 of you who've responded to this. I think it's very important to take note. We are now going to move on to our second question, and I'm going to invite our second speaker to go ahead and unmute yourself. I'm just checking if you are able to unmute yourself, otherwise we will. So Magaswari, you are, let me just, if you just give us a moment, we will unmute you.
Hello, everyone. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay.
Thank you for bearing
you.
with the technical issues. Are you also able to turn on your video?
No, I'm not able to turn on the video unless the host invites me to.
Okay, thank
Okay.
you.
All right,
We'll
but I
sort
think
that.
I'll just start speaking now so that we don't waste time. Okay, greetings from Malaysia, everyone. I represent the Consumers Association of Penang, popularly known as CAP. We are a participating organization of IPEN. Since 2016, CAP has participated in awareness raising activities during the International Lead Poisoning Prevention Week. Yeah.
You should be able to turn your mic and your video on now.
Yes. Thank you, Eunice.
Thank you.
Okay,
Thanks
yeah.
for bearing with us.
All right. So as Malaysia has yet to have a lead paint law, we as a civil society organization, we used the opportunity during the ILPPW to build key alliances among stakeholders from the government, industry, and also raise public awareness regarding the dangers of lead in paint and the importance of having a lead paint law. This has led to the development of 2 draft Malaysian standards. The standard on undercoating paint for gloss enamel was drafted in 2021, whilst the one in architectural coatings was drafted in 2022. Both the standards are now undergoing public consultation and review. Yes, and the standards is setting 90 parts per million limit for lead in dry weight. Next, please. The data generated by CAP on lead content in different types of paint, which included gloss enamel, aerosol paint, lead in playground equipment, lead in toys, and lead in other consumer products, it provided some scientific justification for the stakeholders to act, in terms of having the lead paint standards. CAP also produced our own visibility materials, besides translating and sharing materials from WHO's ILPPW campaign website. These findings were then shared during press conferences and that we had been carrying out for past few years. And this was also widely carried by media and drew attention of the stakeholders, as I mentioned just now, among the public, the government, and also the paint manufacturers. In fact, in 2017, 17 paint manufacturers from the Malaysian Paint Manufacturers Association voluntarily pledged to remove lead from decorative paints. And MPMA became a partner of the Global Alliance to Eliminate Lead Paint, also called the Lead Paint Alliance in 2017. At end of 2020 and after that, active engagement and multiple dialogues among key stakeholders from the government, the industry, and also civil society fast-tracked the development of draft Malaysian standards on lead in paint. Okay, next slide, please. So the ILPPW activities in Malaysia, it included press conferences and awareness raising programs to publicize research findings and call on the government to develop a lead paint law. The images that you can see here are a glimpse of our press conferences over the years, focusing on lead content in paints and also calling to expedite the regulatory action on lead paint. Next slide, please. As Malaysia is a multiracial country, we have media outlets in different languages. So what we do is we translate our press statements into English. Most of the statements are in English, and it's translated into Malay, Tamil, and Mandarin. And this is widely covered by the media, as you can see in the pictures here. And this also ensures outreach to more people, in vernacular languages. Next slide, please. CAP's findings in collaboration with IPEN have been published, and the reports can be found on IPEN's website. The Malaysian Paint Manufacturers Association, whose members are mostly large paint companies, had also committed to manufacturing lead-free paint. You can see their web banner here, which has been up since 2017. And to achieve the global goal for phasing out lead paint, every country needs to have in place legally binding control measures to stop the manufacture, sale, distribution, and import of lead paint. So we use the ILPPW week to emphasize this. Next slide, please. I would like to share the learning and key campaign strategies adapted by our organization with guidance from IPEN. Firstly, data generation in terms of lead content in paint. It provided justification for the stakeholders to act. And this is especially so since we found very high content of lead in gloss enamel paint and playground equipment. In gloss enamel paint, the highest we have got was 100,000, more than 100,000 ppm. On playground equipment, it was 600,000 ppm. So this was really very serious and high content. So CAP used traditional media, both print and broadcast media, to spread public awareness using these test results. Subsequently, we progressed to social media. As we put children's health at the center of our campaigns and messaging, this hit on the emotional level and prompted the various stakeholders to start developing lead paint law. Follow-up actions and active engaging with the decision makers, policy makers, and the paint industry have accelerated the development of the draft standards. We are now awaiting for the standards and accompanying law to make it mandatory. And ensuring compliance to these standards and enforcement measures will be our next move. Can we move on to the next slide, please? So this is towards the end of my presentation, and we will move on to the question number 2. How can the ILPPW and engagement with stakeholders to accelerate the adoption of a lead paint law in your country? How can it help? And if a law already exists, how does it support its enforcement? Thank you. Hope you have a fruitful discussion.
Thank you very much, Magaswari, for those examples very clearly illustrated and giving good food for thought to our participants. You've all been invited now to move into the chat to respond to question 2. Can I remind those of you who are using the Q&A function that we are not using the Q&A function. So if you have posted a question there, could you please post it in the chat so that our members can respond to it, our multi-stakeholder team, as well as our panelists. We'll see you in the chat room and we'll have a few polls again. Thank you. We are all in the chat room. Currently, there is no audio. Just note that there is quite a lively discussion in the chat. So if you can please keep up with that, that would be great. If you click on the chat, it should pop up. If it's too small, at the top, there's a square next to the X where it says maximize. You can maximize the chat and then follow the discussion. Thank you to those of you who are posting comments. I still see that some of you are listed as Eunice. If you could change your name, which would be great. You can do that by moving the cursor over your name and then clicking on more. Thank you. A reminder to include your country or your organization in your comment would help as well. Our first poll question for question 2 has been posted. So looking at your experience, what are the best target audiences for the Prevention Week events and activities? And you can respond to many of these. When you go to menti.com, if you click on the link in the chat, you'll be able to read the selection a bit better. Thank you. Please note that the discussion is not taking place in the WhatsApp group, but rather in the chat function of Zoom. So if you look at the Zoom screen at the bottom, you'll see a speech bubble that says chat. And if you click on that, you will see there's quite a vibrant discussion going on. And thank you to those of you who've posted on the poll already. And for those of you who'd like to, please click on the link in the chat and go to menti.com. So before we move on to our next poll, just to say thank you to the 41 of you who've responded to this poll. And you can see that most of the events are national and local government officials, targeted at national and local government officials, that is policymakers and planners and procurement officers. Then the next target audience is media and journalists, along with the general public and the paint industry. So those seem to be the 4 key target audiences. There's also workers, schools and students, non-governmental organizations, medical professionals, and then moving to less sort of financial institutions, professional associations. If you did put other, you can indicate what the other is in the chat by just saying other and then giving the response. That would be great. So you can see from the poll at the moment that it's still national and local government officials. And I think that's very important to take into account who the target audiences are and if this has been then effective in changing legislation as well as reformulation, etc. We'll give you just a couple, sort of a half a minute. I see some of you are still posting. You can continue to post on any polls that's not showing on the screen if you'd like. We'll now move on to our next poll, our final poll for this question. So what results have you or perhaps others in your country or your organization achieved as a result of the events that took place in the past? And there's a whole selection. So please, again, click on the link in the chat, menti.com, and you can respond. And thank you to those of you who have already. Thank you to those of you who've been responding to our poll. So looking at what are the results. So far, of the 35 of you who've responded, the highest has been increased public awareness and support for eliminating lead in paint, followed by consumers who have more knowledge about the health and environmental issues from lead, then moving on to policymakers and regulators starting to develop a law, as well as increased industry support to phase out lead in paint. The moving down somewhat has been ensuring a draft law that seems to be, that is supported by stakeholders, seems to have been a lower result, as well as strengthening and enforcing existing laws. Those of you who have posted other, if you could please indicate in the chat what the other would be, is most helpful. We are now going to move on to our final question for today, and I'm going to invite Jesse to please turn on your mic and your video and to take us through the introduction to question 3. And just let me know if you are having problems turning it on. Now I see you have managed. Over to you. We cannot hear you at the moment, but I see that you're unmuted.
Thank you, Andrea.
Thank you. We can hear you now.
Good. So it's a pleasure to be here. The last presenter of today, I'm Jesse Martens, the head of Global Public Affairs for AkzoNobel. AkzoNobel is an international paints and coatings company. We're active in almost every country, different brands. Lead and paint is an important topic for my company, and as was mentioned in the introduction, since 2011, lead has not been intentionally used within AkzoNobel. So today what I'm going to do is briefly share some experience and insights from our previous participations in the lead paint prevention week. I really liked all the ideas and the actions that were shared today in the chat. So personally, I learned a lot, and I hope I can still add something to that in this presentation, and we can have a brief discussion afterwards. So I saw a couple of entries in the chat that said, okay, there needs to be a movement, and I think that's crucial, because without broad support in society, it will be very difficult to actually achieve change in regulation and phase out lead. And I think in that process, it's important that the paint industry also shows support for eliminating lead in paint, and the paint industry shows that it's no longer needed in paints. So as a company, you can take action and be active in that process, but also active in communicating about that, about your own policies in trade associations, and you can also activate others to do the same. And I think from the perspective of NGOs and governments, it's also good to reach out to companies and stimulate them to be actively communicating that lead is no longer needed for a paint product that performs equally well. So I think that's an important message that I have here today. And what's been said, also been said a few times, that the upcoming week is a great opportunity also to involve the private industry, and that's, I think, definitely going to help you in delivering your message. You will get more attention during this week, again, because you will be part of a movement. Also internationally, I think it's an important point that also many countries, many governments, they look at international developments, and that also influences their behavior. So I would say make use of the power of this international movement that you have here. It's I think it's a very powerful movement, and again, please involve also the private sector in that the process, also in the regulatory process, and make use of the expertise from companies. It will make your support better, and also help implementation when industry is involved. That is at least my point of view. There may be some lessons learned from the AkzoNobel participation in the week. previous years. So what we did, we said as we are a global company, we set a global strategy, but at the same time we give space to our regional and local teams to adapt that message, because I think it also shows today that the discussion can be very, very different between countries. So we need to adapt to the local situation. So we had a global campaign, but at the same time also local colleagues doing their own campaigns and using their own channels that are mostly most used in their country. Also, we want to make it as easy as possible to communicate, and I think here so the Alliance also comes in. They have great toolkits with ready-to-use information. So I would certainly advise to take a look at those toolkits and just use that information. We do it as well as a company. Furthermore, don't underestimate the internal impact. I experienced that myself in my company, that we also reach our own employees, and we have 35,000 employees around the world, and we also need to share that message with them that lead and paint is no longer needed. And now for us as a company, lead in paint has the elimination of lead in paint has really become a proof point for our sustainability and our ESG messaging. So it's a proof point that goes beyond the topic as such, but really reinforces our sustainability messaging, and that is something that companies like to do. Maybe we can go to the next slide. Thank you. So here I have listed the results of two campaigns that we did in the previous year. So it's the global campaign. So in addition to that, we had some local campaigns, but it's a global campaign, and we focused on social media because we think we can reach the most people there. So in 2018. We used mainly LinkedIn and Twitter. We did a big campaign with videos and several posts, and we reached via those channels only. We reached already more than 500,000 people. So it's quite a big number there. We had policy positions that we posted, especially for the stakeholder audiences, and we also got lots of views for internal articles. Again, I think that's an important thing as well, to involve colleagues. The 2021 campaign, in comparison, was a bit more lean, so with less posts and more endorsing the Alliance post. So it was a bit easier from our side, to be honest, but still, I think good impact with over 130,000 view of our post, and really using our employees as ambassadors and asking our employees to go online and also post about the week. And also this year, of course, we will participate as well with the social media campaign. We're making the plans for that currently. We will do some posts. We also use the toolkit from the Alliance. And there's one thing also that we are increasingly pioneering, and that's that we'll communicate together with our partners. So increasingly we communicate together with suppliers and customers, for example, on new products. And it's also something that we would like to do here with this lead paint Prevention Week. So if there's interest in doing something together with AkzoNobel, please reach out to me, and I can connect you with the right person in your market. Let's go to the question. And the next, so my question here for you is, and please respond in the chat, is what events or activities are you planning for this year's International Lead Paint Prevention Week in October? And if you have not yet begun planning activities, what types of events could you plan? Thanks a lot. I look forward to reading your input in the chat.
Thank you very much, Jesse. I think it's so important to hear the perspectives of different stakeholders. We've been hearing from NGOs, we've heard what WHO has been doing, and now we've heard from the industry and how important it is for the industry and their activities. So thank you very much for your input. Thank you for leading us into this question. If you do want to respond to questions that are posted in the chat, you're welcome to verbally do it if it's easier. Otherwise, I'll see everyone in the chat room. Can I remind people, please, not to post questions using the Q&A but rather use the chat. If you post in the Q&A, others cannot see your questions or comments. Thank you. So Jessa, there's a question for you that was posted in the Q&A. I have reposted it in the chat for you, which is from Belachu Maru, which I'm not sure which country they're from, but it's, oh, Ethiopia. Thank you. Now I can see. The question is there for you.
Yeah, it says, okay, what do you think are the main challenges, bottlenecks for the industry to eliminate the use of lead and lead compounds in paint formulation? Yeah, basically, if you look a step back, also internationally, there's no reason to use lead in paint anymore. So to be a bit blunt, but yeah, basically there are no excuses. What we do see is that traditionally it has been done, and it still happens in some places. So industry might to change application processes. It might need to change formulations, and this is obviously a process that that can be difficult and cost money and can cost money. But in the end, we know it's possible, and it doesn't impact the quality of the paint. It is just a process of change, and therefore I think public pressure can help for consumers that force paint companies to change formulations, but also regulation is very effective here. I find it interesting. There are a couple of comments about testing. So you test if there's lead in paint, and there was also a few comments in the previous discussion. That's also an important one, because you have to know if in your market it's a problem and to what extent. And that's basically the information that you need to actually start the movement. I see there's another question from Leslie. How can you encourage other paint companies to follow the leadership? I think with this week, of course, that's I think important first step to raise awareness. I think if you look at many of the international paint companies, they already took that step. They have policies in place. where they don't intentionally add lead compounds to paint. So that is of course helpful if you have such a company in your market, and trade associations can help there as well. So yeah, it's a question. It's a question of dialogue, I believe, but I think we are moving in the right direction. And there's more and more paint companies that speak out and that say, okay, this is no longer needed.
We have a poll question for you. What kind of resources will be most useful for you or your organization in this year's campaign? And again, go to the link that's in the chat for menti.com. If you're already in Menti, you can just move on to the next question. Thank you. You'll see with this poll, we've given you the ability to only select one, trying to indicate which you see as actually the most useful, if you had to rank them amongst them all. So at the moment, you can see we're getting responses from the 42 of you. It's social media graphics, and then social media toolkit, customizable flyers and posters, and then infographics, as well as awareness raising guidance. We are going to move on to our final poll. So what type of activity would you consider organizing for your prevention week this year? Taking into account that you might be addressing different target audiences and different stakeholders. Again, you can use the Menti link that's in the chat. And thank you to those of you who are responding.
I also read here in the chat that on the website there will be more social media graphics available for this year, and that I agree that's very helpful because they do great on social media. Eh?
Just so you're welcome to make any more comments if you'd like on the poll. And I don't know if you want to make any summing up conclusions before we conclude.
Yeah, oh, it's such a richness here in the chat, and I like also the idea here about involving paint companies that produce paint without lead compounds, that you involve them in that sort of community programs. It says here, okay, we paint a number of kindergarten playgrounds. Also a great way to show what is possible and that it's really no longer needed. Obviously, there were also a few comments here in the chat that say, okay, we got still companies here that produce lead paints, or there's import of paint products that still contain lead, or there's local artisanal production. I think that those are really good comments, and also say that it's not always easy to phase out lead paint. But I think it's important to start somewhere and really build that movements with those companies that are willing to play a part. But no further final comments from my side. If you look at this these Menti results, you know, that there will be a great number of events organized this year, which is an amazing prospect with media, with social media, advocacy roundtables. So it's going to be a very busy week.
Indeed it is. Yes, it is. And it's nice to see such diversity of activities taking place, because I think really you then target a much bigger audience by having all these different activities. So it's very good to see. Thank you again, Jesse, for taking your time and for the input. And thank you to all the other speakers that we have had today as well. I do see occasionally that a few of you have been raising your hands. We, because of lack of time, we do not engage with verbal questions. So if you can just post, Sadia Hassan, I see your hand is up. If you could just please post your question in the chat would be great. We did start a few minutes late, so we will, I will conclude now, but we will stay open for a little bit longer so that we can allow you time to ask any last questions you have, or any other issues that you would like, or information that you would like. So again, I would like to thank our 4 presenters today. I think it's a very important topic with the week. And also to remind you, if you have not joined the Lead and Paint community of practice, to please do so. You will then get notification of our next discussion, which will be on the 16th of November, looking at compliance with lead paint laws. Also, you will receive the digest. So there will be a summary of the discussion we had. If your questions were not answered, those will be answered in the digest. So please, again, make sure you do click on the link to sign up. We do have a WhatsApp group for you to get notification of when the next discussions are. So we encourage you to join that as well. I'd like to thank the multi-stakeholder team for this community of practice who were in the background. Many of them were very active answering your questions. I'd like to thank the UCT team, so Eunice with the technical, Tatum and Mandy in the background. Thank you as well. Again, thank you to SAICM and for the Jeff funding for this COP. This is a very important topic about really drawing attention for paint, for lead elimination in paint. So we appreciate the engagement from all of you for the time that you've taken and your questions that you have posted. So thanks again to everyone. I wish you a good day or evening, and stay safe, and we'll see you for the next discussion on the 16th of November. Bye for now. We will leave the site open for evaluation questions, so please do take a moment to respond to those using the Menti link. Thank you.